And then, okay, fantastic. Welcome everyone here and also everyone who's come online. This is something that we're hugely excited about. So we're going to be starting a series of talks about this type of thing, about careers in publishing, and also about different things that would be interested to our cohort at large. So this particular talk is going to be on AI and publishing. And we're very, very proud to have Dr. Catherine Goodman here, who has a career of, can I say, almost 20 years in academic publishing.
Yes.
So we have a real life expert with us. Catherine was with Nature Publishing, moved through various different communities, actually started in biochemical research, so an ex-postdoc, so worked the way up research. And then Catherine moved into scientific publishing, so almost 20 years ago. And has worked her way through various different journals and now works with the American Chemical Society. And so this talk that we're going to be giving now is basically looking at where we are right now in terms of AI and publishing, because this is something AI, I think we were talking a lot about this over lunch, it's something that's completely changing the landscape of publishing. And for you coming up, for people coming up as early career scientists, and also for people who are actually more senior in their career, everyone is relearning how to think about how they publish, what they're publishing, and exactly where the boundaries are between new technology and what we're actually producing as scientists. So I'm really excited to welcome Catherine to the floor.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Well, it's a super great honor to be here. My sister actually was here last summer as part of the Physics of Living Systems, and she couldn't get over Trieste and all the great physics going on here. And my brother has his PhD in physics. I studied biophysics. So this is I'm by no means a physicist, but I'm really pleased to be at an epicenter of fantastic physics and physical chemistry. So as we were also discussing at lunch, AI in general is a incredibly fast-moving topic. I've captured some thoughts, as well as giving you some kind of context into who I am, what ACS is, etc. I've captured some thoughts that came to mind, but I'm sure more things will come up as we discuss, and I really do hope both you in the room and those of you online, looking forward to a really lively discussion. So, like I said, I'm just going to give you a little bit of context into who I am, why I'm here, giving you this talk, etc. So as Charlotte mentioned, I am a chemist by training. I started my research doing bioorganic chemistry, got interested in protein design, protein mimetics throughout my training. So doing some protein folding, that's my biophysics background. And then I did make the jump into science publishing. So this slide is also a little bit of a preview for those of you who are going to stick around to talk about careers in publishing. These are all the different roles you should feel free to ask me about. I did spend almost 10 years at Nature Chemical Biology, where I was directly handling manuscripts, running the review process, deciding which papers get published, et cetera, et cetera. For the last 10 years or so, I've been more behind the scenes, which I will tell you about more in a moment, at American Society for Biochemistry and Molecular Biology, which is the publisher of JBC, and now the ACS. So again, just to give you a flavor of what my day-to-day includes, I directly manage biochemistry. So that means I'm working with Alana Shepherds and the other editors there, thinking about best practices for the journal, what special issues we might want to do, ethical problems, land on my desk, all those kinds of normal things. I also oversee a team of 3 people, each of whom manages one of our kind of core chemistry portfolios. So, sorry, I'm getting messages from my folks in the States. Whoops. Yes. So I have one person on my team who manages analytical chemistry, sensors, and kind of the measurement portfolio. I have one person who currently is an open role, so I'm currently managing the JPCs, our physical chemistry portfolio, and I have one person who manages our polymer journals, macromolecules, macroletters, etc. So I kind of help them think more broadly about best practices across the journals, managing their budgets, when associate editors need to turn over, making sure that they're paying attention to those kinds of things. So the ACS more broadly, it's one of the largest scientific societies in the world. It does have members from all over the world, including here in Italy. And the mission and vision are very simple. Basically, and these are, the wording has been updated for a 2025 to 2029 strategic plan. If you want more information, there's the link. It's basically to have a world built on science, advancing scientific knowledge, empowering everyone around the world who is contributing to science, and of course, as is very relevant to the talk today, championing scientific integrity, which becomes more and more difficult as we deal with some of these AI issues. Just a quick things that we value. I personally love the inclusion and belonging value. That's actually one that we've kind of taken a step forward from what used to be just the diversity, equity, inclusion, and respect, because this we view as an active statement that we create these environments, we're doing things to help people thrive. It's not kind of a, we're just ticking the boxes and you know, we're really actively trying to do things to improve the chemical community around the world. This kind of lifelong learning, sustainability, those other values. One thing I love about ACS is that it does, you know, these are some calls for papers from journals around the portfolio that really do tackle some very practical issues. We also have the Green Chemistry Institute, which focuses unsurprisingly on green chemistry. We give out grants and awards. So just really helping people get the money they need to get some research going. But we also, hopefully more in line with what many of you are working on, really value that expanding basic knowledge, tackling really important fundamental questions. And again, here are some calls for papers that kind of explore that space. Back to the inclusion and belonging, just to highlight a few of the things that I'm really excited about that are fairly recent. In 2025, we have our first board of directors member who's representing the international community. We have had a growing international community over the years, and we finally have someone that's officially their voice on the board of directors is to express that perspective and help us keep things outside of the US top of mind. We have been, for about 4 or 5 years now, putting out annual reports, tracking, you know, what's happening in our author pool, in our editorial pools. Basically, are our journals fully representative of the communities that they serve? Maybe I'll just highlight the, within the early career researcher section. One thing that we started a few years ago is the topic editor program. It has a couple of purposes, but one of them is to bring on folks who are new to the editorial team, haven't had that experience before, and the editors are meant to kind of give an extra helping hand to walk someone through the process of how do I find a referee, how do I make a decision, when should I do a major revision versus a minor revision, all that kind of stuff. And similarly, some journals have early career boards. Do it. No. Yes, there. That some journals just bring early career researchers into their regular advisory board, but some journals like to amplify that visibility and let it be known these are early career researchers doing really great work in the field and serving as an advisor to the journal. We were talking earlier today about the founder of this institute and how he and others that are memorialized in the library have come from kind of humble beginnings and rose to become leaders in their fields. This diversity and inclusion cover art series, that's now more than half the journals in our portfolio have had a cover art that kind of represents, it's the story of one of the people in our community. People opt in, they're paid for their work. If you are an artist, we are still taking submissions, and in fact the JPCs still have some room for a cover art, so keep that in mind. And I will add a QR code to the slides that we upload. So this particular one, if I can point at it. Yes, this particular one is the story of a professor who started his career, I believe in Thailand, And he was so passionate about wanting to be at school and learning all the science that he could, that he would routinely stay at the school until it was so late he had to literally carry a torch to see his way home. And he just talks in the editorial that he wrote to accompany the art about he never dared to dream that when he was running through the fields that he would become a professor and get to pursue, advancing our understanding of basic knowledge. So these stories really captivate me, and I think do a nice job of making it clear who really is in our community. So again, just to kind of set the stage a little bit, part of the reason I'm sharing this with you is because these are all the places where, as a researcher, you may often think that publishing is kind of, you submit your paper, you get the reviews, the paper's published, the end. But actually there are a huge number of things happening in the background that need people, need advances, may be touched by AI now or in the future. And so we can come back to any of these if you like, but in the meantime, so here's the wrong pointer. Here we go. Here's the part that you're probably most familiar with. And I have the ACS Reviewer Lab here to remind me to tell you that if you are interested in getting more involved in the editorial process, going through the ACS Reviewer Lab, which is a few hours course, and kind of is meant to bring you up to speed on kind of the basics of peer review, how you make good comments and help authors get to the final endpoint. That puts you in our system with a special badge that tells the editors, this person is primed and ready to go. So if they see you in there with the mark, it can often be a good indicator of like, oh, use that person. They've invested the time, they've shown you that they're committed to doing it. So there you go. So again, somewhat related to AI, as you'll see in a minute. I just wanted to give you a quick overview of the ways in which we think about how journals are doing, which is a really, really broad question with many possible answers. So as you can see here on with these arrows, there it is. The things that are of course easiest to measure, this is often true in research as well, are usually the least meaningful, and the things that are hardest to measure are the most meaningful about what does the journal really mean for that community. We can get a proxy of that through, are people reading the content? That's a pretty good sign if they are interested in the content or not. But even, processing times, things that are meaningful to authors in terms of how quickly that journal is gonna look at my paper, etc. But what we really would love, more and more is to see that the journals are filling a void through thought leadership and representation that, if you took that journal out of the publishing ecosphere, that there would be a meaningful gap, that it's doing something to really advance what's possible and I have this slide here.
I have to notice that in your list,
yes,
the fact of publishing the best chemistry does not even appear, which I would have thought would be your main.
That's kind of underpins all of it, I guess. Most of it's a notable omission. You're right, but it kind of sits underneath everything for me. You can't be providing thought leadership if you're publishing terrible papers. You can't be expecting to get usage and social media engagement if you're publishing papers that aren't good. So, so I guess that is kind of how we're measuring, are the papers that the journal is publishing interesting and worthwhile? Are people coming to this journal because it's fulfilling a need that they have to advance their understanding, to advance their own research career, etc. So I guess these are proxies for how we measure, is it doing those things?
Okay, so your goal is not, for example, that a great new piece of, a great new discovery is in ACS and not in elsewhere. That is not your goal.
We want all the great research, of course. I I think the point I'm trying to make is that what somebody finds to be a good paper or not is extremely variable. You may love a paper, someone else thinks it's stupid. Someone may love a paper, someone else thinks it's not novel or impactful. And so these are the kinds of ways in which we can get a sense for how the community is responding to the work. Of course, the editors are making a decision based on what they think the science tells us and is it meaningful, impactful, et cetera. But we don't have a good way to capture the editor's opinion about that. You know, they don't write a public statement of this is why I published that paper. So it really comes down to what does the community think about it? And these are the ways that we have to measure that. Does that answer your question?
No,
Okay.
it's more comment than a question.
Yeah. I mean, yes, the ideal would be to just directly measure, is this an amazing paper or not? But if we had that measurement, we wouldn't need any of these measurements. So they're all proxies for that. This is mostly as a point of reference that I can come back to if you guys want more information about how the overall structure at ACS Journals works. I can quickly tell you that the titles in black on the left are all research active professors, researchers at institutions, et cetera. The folks on the right are all internal staff. So we have about 900 editors, and then about, within the first three categories, about 30 or 40 staff to help out. So just to give you a sense for our editors, you have some of them local, so you can always ask them questions for more information, but like I said, these are all research active scientists. When editors come on board, they get training, of course, in how to use the submission system, but also in ethics, in implicit bias, and then the journals drill down into how do we like to handle, for example, a major versus a minor revision at this journal. And again, we have those metrics to help us understand, like, is an editor routinely extremely slow? You know, maybe if it's a brief blip where they were having a personal problem of some kind, understandable, but if months and months and months go by and they're not kind of getting up to speed, then the editor-in-chief steps in to say, hey, what's going on? You know, you're not serving our authors appropriately. So there's that kind of ongoing oversight. And we do have a intention that there should be some turnover at the journals to bring in fresh perspectives, fresh representation, et cetera. So in general, editors should leave a role after 10 years. And just to highlight, I'm gonna skip ahead. If you guys wanna know more about transfers or appeals, we'll come back to those. So I first wanted to share our ACS policy. This was updated fairly recently, but will be also continuously updated, I'm sure, as AI continues to evolve over time. The basic message to take away here is authors can use generative AI in basically any way they want, as long as they acknowledge it. Referees absolutely cannot use generative AI. And the reason there is due to the confidentiality of the review process. There's a lot that's happening in the black boxes of AI systems that we don't understand or we don't want to expose our papers to. So people should neither upload a paper and say, write me a report, or write their report and then upload it and say, you know, fix the language or whatever. It should be totally separate. So this is a slide that I love. It's a little bit small for those of you in the live audience, but this is from Ani Mahapatra, who used to be a publisher at ACS, now is a publishing director.
Sorry, can you go back?
Yeah.
So how sustainable do you think this model is of the last one, which is referees cannot use generative AI?
We were talking about that at lunch. Basically, we have to trust our community. We cannot go to every individual desk and like watch people do their reviews. So it's possible that there are ways to check if someone's text looks too AI written. I don't think we have a good control over them uploading a PDF and getting a summary back. So it's an honor system for sure. Okay, so in this scenario of those of you who don't know War Games, the movie, it's a 1980s movie from the US, in which a computer simulator within the military that's used to simulate war somehow gets triggered to think that it's actually under attack. And so it's a computer fighting a computer to the point where nuclear missiles almost get launched and Matthew Broderick and others go in and save the day. So that's kind of the thought exercise here. So it's basically, we could start with, can we? Yes. So you have automated artificial intelligence to create hypotheses, test your samples. Then once you've got the data, the AI writes the article for you and comes up with a reference list. Then it tells you which journal to submit to and submits it. Then you use ChatGPT or what have you to review the paper and make a decision. It goes into computer automated production, gets published in some way, then it gets sent to the right people who are working in that field, et cetera, et cetera. And so you could imagine a future in which we all just go on vacation and the computers just do research for us, and that's the end of it. I don't think any of us want that future, because doing research is fun sometimes. But here I just captured a few of the ways in which we're currently using AI. And by we, I mean kind of the publishing ecosystem. And then I'll share a little more about where it could be going. So there's all kinds of places where AI can be helping you all as researchers. In terms of reading, we do have a content recommender, and many other publishers as well have a way to say, we noticed you were interested in this. How would you like some more? Here's another article. We have what used to be called virtual issues, but now is collections, kind of a assembly of published research that's on a particular topic. So those can just be automatedly saying, yes, here's another paper on that keyword, put it there so everyone can see. There's some journals that have lay abstracts where at some point a human was writing those, and now an AI summary can kind of say, this is the general gist of this for people who aren't experts in the field. In terms of the submission side, maybe a second, there it is. Some websites and publishers have a journal recommender that tells you, if you're working on this topic, you should send it to this journal. Those can range from pretty basic to, to a publisher specialized, to the whole ecosystem. We are just expanding. Those of you who've been to the ACS submission system recently know that we have a new submission system front end, and we are currently rolling out to organic letters so far, but other journals won't be far behind, that you can just kind of drag and drop your paper and it extracts all the data and saves you a lot of time in submission. We currently have papers can be based on past assignments. The computer can tell an editor-in-chief, hey, this editor seems like the most likely person to want to handle this paper. I recommend you assign it to them. They don't have to take it, but it can shortcut the process. And similarly, once an editor decides to send a paper out to review, there are many tools, as you can imagine, to help them think about who would be an appropriate referee for that work. Within our production team, it won't be any surprise that we have some tools we can use to help our copy editors move forward more quickly, that are varying levels of AI, machine learning educated, that I will not talk about since this is being recorded. So that's kind of a picture of where we are right now. I think the exciting thing to think about is where we could be going. And there's a lot of different things that you could add in. So let's start back at the submission step. There it is. So what if, instead of just saying, hey, you're working on physics, you should submit to JPC? What if it could tell you, you should submit to JPCA specifically and part 1 specifically, and if you I analyze your paper, and if you submit there, you'll have an 81% chance of acceptance. That would give you a lot more information than just, hey, you're a physical chemist. Or, you know, maybe if you're interested in JAX and JPC and energy letters, then it could tell you what's your relative chance of being accepted in any of those 3 journals, or, you know, put you directly in touch with the editor who would be handling your paper, et cetera. So this could be, come back, a lot more immediately successful. And I had gone briefly by the transfer slide earlier, but, you know, we love our transfers because
Sorry, but this would be based on historical data, right? Like the recommendation system.
yeah, I mean, it
The
could
scientific
be,
field would evolve, so how would you update it with that?
it could be based on whatever you want, right? However you train the AI. It could be based on editorials that the editor-in-chief has written about. We have one journal in particular where the editor has written an editorial saying, I don't want these kinds of papers at my journal. And he wrote it because he gets those kinds of papers submitted over and over. And even after the editorial, people still submit. And so if there was an AI tool that could just say, hey, you should read this editorial because it seems like your paper doesn't fit this journal. So it could be trained on whatever you want.
Sure, but on a larger scale, you would train it on historical data. Like that's the way you would do it. But a scientific field would evolve, and what is a field of interest today might not be the field of interest tomorrow. So how would you recommend in the future?
I mean, you could shorten the window, you could, and get more forecasting. You could add in, you know, new terms as the field evolves. I mean, one fantastic thing about having editors who are practicing scientists is they see all the evolutions that you're experiencing too. So as, you know, you would put in some regular time of saying, okay, let's update the AI for the next period or whatever it is. As things change so much that existing journals don't cover those scopes anymore, I mean, everyone has to evolve with the times or die, right? That's what evolution is about. So you would have to just retrain. Okay. Thinking about kind of the checks that could happen. Right now, when we have our metadata extractor, it's checking like, do you have affiliations for all your authors, what have you? But you could imagine as the system gets smarter and smarter, okay, maybe it starts checking. Right now we have people who look and say, oh, you reference 5 figures, but only 4 figures were uploaded. So they have to send it back to you and say, please upload the extra figure file. The computer could obviously do that. But it could even get even smarter than that as we go along, that maybe you've uploaded some microscopy images and it notices, hey, there's no control or there's no scale bars. Give me a new figure that has scale bars because that's something the referees are going to absolutely ask for. And at some point, maybe it starts telling you like more scientific things. You know, it could be kind of a review assistance even before you officially submit your paper, so that by the time it gets to the editor's desk, what has to be evaluated is basically just, you know, novelty, impact, scope, rather than some of those technical details. There are some good things that could happen in review. So like I was just saying, could we simplify the review process for humans who we know are super busy and have a lot of things on their plate? If a referee asks someone to add some citations, could we have an analyzer tell us those citations are not really relevant? It's just the referee wanting you to add their papers. So that would be a quick way to control some referee abuse. If the editors have forgotten that they sent a related paper out to review a month ago, maybe there could be an automatic check to say, I don't think you should reject that paper because it's not consistent with how you handled another paper on this topic. Or if there's folks who have a bias against a certain topic or demographic diversity of some kind, it might be a good catch to say, hey, you liked this paper from this other person on this topic, why are you rejecting this one? And then back to the kind of reading, one thing that has been amazingly helpful with AI and just kind of large data sets in general is finding new people to reach out to when we're thinking about starting a new special issue. So rather than just rely on the network of the guest editors to think about who the best folks in the field are, we can just have the machines tell us, like, these are the top 100 people, these are the top 500 people, whatever it is, and you can have a starting point to better understand who's really appropriate to be invited. And kind of back to some of this summary idea, someone has the volume up. Okay. You know, you could, as is happening now, but hopefully as AI gets better and better, it'll stop making up references and instead just give you more appropriate summaries of what's really in the literature. One other thing that came to mind as a really good use of AI is often we are influenced in our reading by our local community, whether that's a geographic community, a subfield, et cetera. And so, you know, maybe we thought the first time something was shown was in this paper, but maybe AI could tell us, actually, you have to go back 3 other papers so you can properly cite the person who really discovered something. As we discussed at lunch, with AI, everything comes in balance, everything is complicated. Kind of to the question earlier about how do we prevent people from using AI inappropriately, that is a huge challenge for this field. And so both as authors and referees, there are already some tools to try and catch those things, but are they as good as they need to be? No. And as the AI gets better and some of the tells of AI use disappear, it'll get even harder to catch. So how do we educate our community appropriately and make sure that people are doing things properly? One thing that you could imagine, kind of back to my idea of, you know, if those initial checks are telling you you don't have your scale bar, that's one thing. But if it's now telling you you haven't done this research according to the field accepted best practices, well, maybe the field accepted best practices work if you're at Harvard with $8 billion at your disposal, but they don't work if you're in some less, you know, well-funded place, or if you're not quite overlapping with the scientific research and your interest is a different side of it. So I think we would have to be really careful not to say that there's one way to do research. One thing that I'll come back to in the future slides is if AI starts telling us these are the important papers, these are the important problems to work on, it can exacerbate some bias that already exists in the field about people who are working on things that are good versus less important. One thing, these 3 things, I think you guys all have a lot more to say than I will, but one thing that's a real challenge with people using AI to help them in their research, I actually saw a talk at the ASM last year where someone had just told their AI tool, I want to find some metabolic engineering hacks to improve my titer of this molecule. And the machine went and thought and thought and thought, and they had programmed it such that it would come up with hypotheses and then do the experiments to test those hypotheses and feed back in and on and on and on. So after some number of rounds, it said, oh, you need more citrate synthase, or whatever it was. And they can test and say, okay, yes, we increased citrate synthase, it got us the outcome we wanted, isn't that great? But how do they know how it got there, and how can we reproduce that study in a meaningful way? There's a lot of black boxes that will be difficult to write about and explain and make possible to reproduce. I meant to put this on the previous slide because I think it's a good thing. There's a lot of things right now that you can do with money. You can hire a writer, you can hire a vendor, you can outsource your chemical synthesis, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think the good thing about this is that AI can level the playing field for people, again, who don't have $1 billion at their disposal to help us kind of move things forward. And one thing that is concerning that we are starting to see crop up is editors writing into their points of contact like me saying, I think this person is using AI and what should we do about it? In some cases, someone using AI is extremely obvious. We've all seen those examples online where the ChatGTP prompt is still directly in the text. Those are very obvious misuse of AI. But what if someone just thinks this person clearly couldn't be such a good writer? They must be using AI. And now I want to put a flag on their account and hold them accountable for something that I have no direct proof of. So just as there's the possibility that it can help someone who's not a confident writer, it has the opportunity to create bias as well. And I wanted to come back to this, well, many of these topics, but kind of this one in particular. The problem with, as AI kind of accelerates everything that's already happening in research and publication, our whole kind of the way that scientific research works is, you do research, you write papers, you get grants and tenure and awards and blah, blah. But this practice, is hundreds of years old in some cases, and there's only so many positions, there's only so much money. We all are super passionate researchers and want to do work. How do we make sure that people who have great ideas, have great execution, get the recognition and opportunities that they want? So kind of directly related to your earlier question, the AI has learned from the past. And so if it tells us that a certain topic is important, even if it's no longer important, it can just exacerbate that. And I wanted to highlight here with this quote, just the point that this is not just a conversion that I've had since I left Nature Chemical Biology. This is actually from an editorial that we wrote when we first received our impact factor, that we are concerned with the growing importance of numerical ranking systems for evaluating science and scientists. That, again, back to your point, trying to say, this is great chemistry, you can't put a number on it directly. And so kind of just as a way that plays out, there's sometimes a perception that the work at the high impact journals is of more quality or importance than other journals. In reality, it's a pretty big mishmash. So I can tell you, when I was at Nature Chemical Biology, I published a lot of papers that I thought were terrific. Maybe they got 2 citations. I don't know why. I would publish them again, even knowing that, because I thought it was really cool and insightful. I also, when I was at JBC, which has a much lower impact factor, published some papers that were off the charts cool, that were gonna go directly impact COVID vaccines or new drugs or new applications. So it's really a mishmash. Why does that matter? So this fascinating paper from 2010 studied duplicate publications, of which there are shockingly enough to write a whole paper on it. And they found that the intrinsic value of a paper is not why a paper gets cited. If you publish a paper in a higher impact journal, then you get more citations. So that directly tells you that people are not able, even 15 years ago, when we had many fewer journals, many fewer publications, people do not have time to read all of the papers and assess their quality individually. This could be aided by AI, it could be made worse by AI. And why does that matter? So, as we all know, the impact factor is a numerical calculation that is subject to variation. And I think this is a delightful example. This is not in any way meant to be a knock on this particular journal, just it's really exemplary of how weird this system is. So in 2010, active crystallography D, so here's 2010, published these 2 important papers. They got almost 20,000 citations between them. So the next 2 years that those papers were in the impact factor window of that journal, look, their impact factor went from 3 to 15. Does that mean that journal is now suddenly magically better? It's the same journal. It just happened to publish these 2 papers. So the ways in which the impact factor reflects the quality of the content is ephemeral and kind of meaningless. The other thing that you should keep in mind, and these numbers are a little bit out of date. I think I did this analysis, I don't know, a few years ago. But as a general back of the envelope calculation, the most popular journals that everyone likes to read publish only about 5,000 papers a year, whereas the entire scientific community publishes about 1.5 million papers a year. So if we say only those papers are important, then suddenly less than 1% of the papers that are published are of high impact. And I think we can agree that that's not a realistic representation of, the good work that everyone is doing around the world. And why does this matter? So again, this is a problem that I think will be exacerbated by AI, is when I talk to enzymologists who are kind of experts in different kinase, serine hydrolase fields, what they tell me, and what you can see in the literature as well, is that the community kind of gloms on to a few enzymes that everyone says, these are the important ones, let's study those. What we don't know is, what about if this one over here could be the explanation for a disease, could be applied in biotechnology, could be the answer to some other problem that we're facing. But it's harder because you're working on an enzyme that no one cares about. It's harder to get published, it's harder to get grants, it's harder to get invitations to talk, so there's just less visibility. Similarly, again, back to the money issue. This is just, the data are not meant to be read in particular, just to show you there's a very unequal distribution of where money is going into science across the world. And so if you're in one of these countries where, over here, where there's more money per GDP, that doesn't necessarily mean more money per scientist, but where countries where science is a heavier investment, does that mean that they should get more of a voice when they maybe have just as good of ideas or just maybe fancier tools at their disposal? So I think this is a pre-AI slide, but I think you can see how a lot of the challenges in AI are going to make some of these more difficult or less difficult. So I will let you read those. One thing that I think you're very lucky at ICTP to have a terrific science communication department. It was shocking how large the group is and how clearly valuable the group is compared to other institutions I've been to. So I would just say appreciate the terrific resources you have here and support them more broadly. And then, so I would love many more questions. Excited to hear what you guys have to say, and happy to go back, obviously, to any details.
Thank you very much. You can now have some water. Amazing job, because it's quite warm in here. So, any questions? We've actually had quite a few questions. Oh, okay, yeah, okay, Sandra.
Well, thank you very much for this talk. Now, as much as I sympathize with your feelings when you describe this war game scenario, I mean, assume one day, out of this machinery, completely automatic machinery, you get something which is, I don't know, the best drug for malaria, and that saves millions of lives. Would you still consider that something unethical or something that we should not be pursuing? And I mean, how do publishers actually see it? Because it seems to me that you're actually trying to, avoid that scenario, but we may not be that far from that scenario, to be honest.
I mean, that's a great question. I think I'm less trying to advocate for we shouldn't have it, and more assuming that as scientists, we would all like to keep our jobs. So in that scenario, at what point do 5%, 50%, 90% of the human beings become irrelevant? And at what point do we say, I don't have room for 9 graduate students, I have room for 1. So the rest of you go to something else.
Millions of lives, right?
No, I mean, I guess it shouldn't be that it's an either or.
No.
It should be included together. I think back to our policy at ACS, the challenge with AI is it cannot take ownership of the research. It can't, at the moment, tell us how it got there. It can't respond to email queries. It can't, be invited to give a talk. So is there a future where some of that's possible? Sure. Is that where we are right now? Definitely not. So you're right. If computers want to solve any number of huge problems facing the world, that would be amazing. I think we don't have a good sense yet of how to coexist in that world. Yeah.
I was wondering about this. You mentioned that you could have an AI tool, and you're maybe thinking of it as a positive thing. It could help you in deciding where I should submit my paper, and it could tell me like it has an 80% chance of being accepted if I submit it to that paper. I was wondering like what should be the base of that, and if it's not dangerous if you do that, that you can only basically continue publishing the same stuff that has been published before, because you could say, okay, if the editor now reads the same number that sees, okay, this paper will be rejected with 80% probability, but it might be just disruptive and new, and that's why it's particularly interesting.
Yeah, kind of similar to the
cannot
previous question.
detect that, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely, in the ideal world, someone would be putting forward something that's like so brand new that it cannot be classified according to existing literature. In the vast majority of cases, I think research is more a step forward rather than no one has ever thought about this concept ever before. So undoubtedly, in those magical cases, there would have to be, maybe the AI would just tell you, I can't assess this, good luck. I mean, I don't know what it would say, but, and maybe there would be a more complete report than just 80% go. Maybe it would be, your paper is similar to these papers or not. I don't know. Someone with more computational knowledge than me would have to design a good system.
Yeah, I was just wondering because, again, from my experience or the way I see at least historical developments in science, it's also very often that like the big new steps are precisely those that are not could not be captured by such a tool in principle, because you don't have any training data on maybe one paper every 10 years, right? So it's just in principle not. I would guess it's not possible in principle to capture that by something like AI.
Yeah.
Rare events, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would have to be, I truly like, I'm not a programmer, I'm not a computational person, I'm not a physicist. So like someone smarter than me would have to design a good system. And truly maybe it could say like, you're not using enough keywords that make sense to me in any context of what's come before, I can't advise you. That would have to be a possibility as well.
Okay, any other questions?
So thanks very much for your talk. I had a question related to one of your points on leveling the fields, so to speak. And one of the things that's happened with the AI revolution is that it's allowed for people whose non-native language, being English,
Yeah.
to focus on the scientific aspects.
Absolutely.
And so that I think has been a very positive outcome of this whole thing. And so at the ACS and maybe in other journals, is AI now a tool that someone from person X who is not strong in English can take for free, put in their science, and then have the tool do all the decorative English stuff,
Right.
so that it's acceptable to the journal?
Right. So actually, one of the reasons I left my last job is because I kept going to the publishing director at ASBMB and saying, what if we could help non-native speakers and let's do something really meaningful? And she would say, Catherine, we have 3 journals here. You're biting off too much. And so I realized I had outgrown that position and I needed to find a place that was a little more, had scope for more. So I think it's a super open question of there's ChatGTP and Microsoft has one and Google has one and 17 other people have generative AIs now. And we have some internal tools that are not as fancy as what you're talking about, but maybe someday they would be. I think one question that comes up is, we actually did a pilot, I think it officially launched last year, that I was involved with helping on, where we took some of those tools that are currently being used in production after a paper is accepted, and we offered them to authors during submission. It's not as fancy as a ChatGTP, so the timing was kind of terrible because people who really want a lot of help probably are going there. And other publishers have done similar experiments. If we offer language assistance upfront, how does it change the dynamics of that paper going through peer review? And the outcomes are pretty consistent, that if language is polished, even some papers go more quickly out to review, go more quickly through the review process, are more likely to get accepted. So it tells you, A, we clearly have a very large bias problem, and B, like, we should be using all the tools that we can. One challenge is somebody has to pay for some part of it, like even if it's just the development, but also the ongoing maintenance to keep up with fields as they evolve. So one of the questions that was asked when we asked to do this pilot was, how do you keep people at ACS? Because if ACS is investing the money to create the tool, we want to publish those papers. So what we really need is a broader initiative. There's a group called DeepXL, I think is the name of it, that's working on translations, full translations. They've actually partnered with Nature, which I'm jealous about, but they're like, the idea is, you just write in whatever language you want, we'll put it into English. And you can imagine, obviously, if that tool works, take it from English into whatever language you want to read it too. I mean, that's one of the things I'm most excited about with AI, yeah.
Thanks.
That was kind of a meandering answer, but I hope that,
Perfect.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a huge opportunity, right, for democratizing and open science.
Yeah. I mean, how far down the road are we with this?
So as of 21, when I first saw that DeepMind had partnered with Nature, they were doing a pilot with their books program. I have not checked back to see, books is kind of a slow-moving enterprise, so I have not checked back to see if they rolled it out further. I mean, in terms of, on our side, like I mentioned, we've redone our submission system up front a little bit, and we're rolling out now this metadata extractor, et cetera. It's an obvious next step to bring some of those production tools to the front. Whether the production tools are currently going to be truly impactful in this way remains to be seen. So I don't know. I mean, I think if someone truly went full investment on this,
Yeah.
we could be less than 5 years away. You know,
Okay, but it would have to be a joint effort, right? Because
kind of
otherwise, if you had people coming into ACS and you gave them this tool and then maybe they weren't accepted and they took it to another journal or something,
Right.
that would be the thing that you wouldn't want.
Right. And you could have some rule like, if you eventually get published with us in whatever journal, this service is free. If not, if it gets published somewhere else, it costs you money, but then we have to track all the things, and it's not,
So it
again,
doesn't
not
get published at all,
democratic.
then
If it doesn't get published at all, it's super messy. So I like to pretend that finances aren't important, but there are other people at ACS who do not agree. Yeah.
I have follow-up basically on that. So, I mean, right now there's already tools, right? I could just go and put my whole paper through ChatGPT and say
Sure.
improve the paper.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering, like, is there any statistics for how many people do that? I mean, you said the policy is you can do that, but you have to acknowledge this help.
Yeah.
Is there any statistics of how many people do actually acknowledge that? Because I've read, I mean, I've not seen this, I think, in any paper that anyone wrote in the end. I used ChatGPT to improve the text. But
Yeah, I've definitely seen it. Yeah. I've definitely seen it in the acknowledgements, but I don't think we have statistics. That would be,
And
We should get
all of
those.
the statistics I would find interesting is,
Yeah.
like, does it change the acceptance rate?
Yeah.
Like, if you see like someone use ChatGPT and they acknowledge that, will it increase your chances or reduce your chances?
Yeah.
Things like that.
Yeah, how do the
It's-
editors feel about that?
So some editors definitely get all in a twist about how dare they get help. I think I think the majority of editors understand this is our policy, understand it's not a level playing field, want people to get whatever help they can to express their science clearly. Yeah, the challenge is we don't have a control, right? So if someone submitted the same paper before and after ChatGPT, they would get flagged for duplicate submission. So we can't run the experiment, but it would be fascinating. I think the pilot I was mentioning does show pretty clearly that language polishing in general does help outcomes. But I don't know how many of those papers acknowledged it.
You know, also like the papers who acknowledge it, maybe they get rejected because they acknowledge it.
Yeah, it's super complicated.
Okay, we've got one here. Yeah, so go with you first, and then we've got one more.
Right, so thank you for the presentation, and I was thinking about the thought about scientists keeping their jobs, and then my curiosity is related to how libraries evolved. We have lots of hard copy, references way back before computers, and after computers, we transcribe everything to electronic. Did librarians lose their jobs, or do we have to acknowledge which library we visited, to do our references? And when we use Google Scholar or any other search engine, we have to also acknowledge these things in our publications as to where we, improved our research, process. And what prompted the desire that scientists or research scientists should acknowledge a generative, pre-trained transformer, which is a computer or a search engine or a certain engine or a black box, as anybody will put it. What prompted us to now shift much attention to acknowledging these, support tools during our research in this period, and why didn't we, allow these things in the previous times during our scientific, endeavors?
Yeah, that's a really fun question to think about.
Why are we doing that?
Yeah, I think the transition in my mind is because the generative AI is contributing to the thought process. So regardless of whether you found a paper in a hard copy in the library or as a PDF online or whatever it was, the thinking up to this point has been, you are still using your eyeballs to read the paper, think about it, fit it into the larger context, go look for other references that are relevant, through whatever searching tools, whether it's checking the references, whether it's again going to a library, whatever it is. And I think the thing on the publishing side, at least, that makes us feel different is that in some cases now, some of the ideas that are contained within the paper may not have been formulated by a human. And so we want that to be clear. Does that make sense? But I love the thought exercise. You're right. Like, why don't we acknowledge a lot more things than we do? It's fun.
But generative AI is not capable of completely independent creation of thought. It's maybe copying from some existing thing it has seen. It might not be based on the person who's writing the paper, but it's not capable of complete, innovative, new thought, which is...
I think it depends on how you use it. Some people write, tell me about blah, and then they copy and paste that.
Sure, but the blah that the AI is spitting out it has seen it somewhere in its training data set. Otherwise, it wouldn't say that.
Sure.
It was ultimately.
So it's
Couldn't
not
you say the
completely
same for human brains as well?
Sorry?
Couldn't you say the same for human brains as well?
Sure, but but the point of acknowledging AI contribution, it's not like it's creating something by itself.
No, but it's thinking about what's in its training set, and it's telling you something that isn't information that you independently came to.
But that's the same as in search engine. If you're searching something, you're getting the same thing.
But I think with the search engine, what you're offered is here are 10,000 papers, you pick the ones that you think are most relevant and go read them or find a review or whatever.
The search engine also ranks the papers, right? So you're getting some kind of
Probabilistic distribution.
exactly.
And then whichever is the most peaking is what you get as an output.
Exactly.
And then the pre-trained transformer is also behaving the same way. It has a training set. It has the probability distributions as to what to use to give you the best option or to serve you with the best answers.
It's true.
So why didn't we hype,
Maybe we should have.
Scholar, or when it was raining?
Yep.
And then now that GPTs are raining, we feel like we should now,
Yeah, I have no counter argument. We could acknowledge a lot of things that assist us in our research.
The publishing groups are overemphasizing this AI thing and everybody should acknowledge this or that. Then if that should be the case, we should also democratize, all the library services that are also, because some people would not probably use these GPTs or computers or might not find a lot of interest in digital stuff. They go to the library, look up for archaic information or what is so-called archaic and is not available digitally.
Yeah.
And they get lots of excitement from these things. And
Yeah, I mean, I think the most salient argument is this is new and different. Everyone kind of uses search engines and we probably anticipate that's part of the process. We understand that even though they rank things and offer you, out of 10,000 relevant papers, it presents you with these 10 first, right? So that is clearly doing something for you. But this is new. In 10 years, maybe our policy will be you only have to acknowledge if a robot wrote the entire paper for you, or maybe it will be like, we'll be on Mars. And so, I mean, like, we don't know, but this is what's happening right now. So that's why this is the policy for right now. No.
thank you.
Yeah. No, it's a super fascinating thing to think about.
Yeah, I think one of the things that you were saying also about this idea of democratized library resources, that some people in certain places, they don't have the resources to all the papers to potentially look for something. So using something like GPT or something like that is actually a way to maybe get information they might not be able to get in another way, potentially.
Yeah.
If you don't have full access, which is something that we often talk with the library team here, is that it's not like everyone has perfect access to everything.
Yeah.
Depending on where you are, you can actually run into a situation where you actually aren't able to access the relevant papers to what you're doing.
Actually, just this morning, I answered an email from someone who said, I need to put in my package for promotion and I'm in a country that doesn't have access to an ACS journal. Can you please send me my paper? Yeah, I will of course do that, but you're right, access is not universal.
Okay, so we've got a couple more questions from our remote audience.
Thank you.
Okay, so you're getting a lot of questions. Let's recover. So basically, the first one is Cecil from Ames in Africa, and they're saying, won't the AI translated manuscript be flagged for AI generated content by the journal? So basically, his question is, is that if you were to use AI software, then it would it automatically be flagged by the journal as something that, or maybe how do you do that? I think is the question.
I'm trying to think of who, someone else on my team would know those logistics more. I think as long as you acknowledge it, I mean, the process that we run every single one of our papers through is a plagiarism detector. So without doubt, before your paper is accepted, it goes through this detector. The AI detector is currently being deployed in a more targeted fashion. So
in what sense? In the sense that it would be, something would be flagged and then it would go through, but it wouldn't automatically.
Right. And again, even if there were reasons that the paper got flagged and put through these tools, if someone, according to our policy, if someone has acknowledged it, they're in the clear. I think the bigger question would be if the reason that it was flagged was because it was, here is a prompt for ChatGTP, some revisions would be necessary. Yeah, we don't want that in our papers.
Okay, one last one, which is, okay, so this is from Sarah, and this is, what guarantees the quality of what is produced by AI?
Good question. The authors. I mean, the authors still take, that's why AI is acknowledged, not a co-author, because the authors have to take responsibility for what's in their paper. If they create text using ChatGTP, they have to read it using their eyeballs and say, yes, this makes scientific sense. Yes, I have added the appropriate references, whatever. Yeah, they still, if there's an ethical problem with the paper that comes back to bite them, it's the authors that are.
I guess the ultimate responsibility always lies with the author. Yes, yes. Okay, do we have any more questions? We have a ton of questions, but any more? Okay, I'd just like to say thank you very much to Catherine.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Hey,
Good to see
lovely to
you.
meet
Nice to meet
you.
you.
Yeah. When you walked in, I was like, I'm pretty